Welcome to Let Me Know How It Is, a podcast about all things geek. Today, the panel expresses what it is about the DC Universe we love so much. We'd really appreciate it if you would support the show by hitting that subscribe button, and of course, thanks for listening. Alright, it's no secret if you listen to any of our past episodes that it's pretty clear we love the DC Universe over here at Let Me Know How It Is, but today I thought we'd go in a little bit deeper into just what it is about the DC Universe we love so much. So, I'm Zach Slater.
I'm Frank Melman.
I'm Tommy Smithereens.
I'm Clifton.
Alright, so for the record, I want to stress to the listeners, this is not an anti-Marvel episode. That's not what's going on here. We may compare the two here and there for parts of the episode, but this is not by any means saying that one universe is better than the other. I assure you, we love the Marvel Universe too. There will be a Why We Love the Marvel Universe episode coming. I promise that. But for this one, this is about showing love for DC. So, who wants to start us off?
Well, I love Superman. I mean, I enjoy the character. I appreciate its longevity. And as far as I'm concerned, he's the archetype to the superhero. He's what started off on what we need, or a person having powers more than just the usual walking around and solving crimes, not swinging from trees or anything. He flies, he does damn near everything, and he wants to make the world a better place. You know, I mean, I think he's the focal point of heroism, I guess, as far as being genuine in his need for everyone to live a simple and easier life, despite what's going on in their life. You know.
Yeah, I think the thing that is crucial to Superman and sort of the DC universe as a whole, sort of, you can argue either way, but Superman's positive. He's optimistic. He's hopeful, you know?
Yeah, he embodies a lot of things that we want to see in ourselves on a regular basis, you know?
Yeah. He's a good guy. That's the thing. It's like, you know, there's a purity to him, and I like that. That's I like the heroism,
yes,
that he brings to the table and to the DC universe in large. I like that it's about heroes trying to do the right thing, the good thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, given his background, humble beginnings, you know, trying to make it in a big town,
Lone survivor
of a cautionary tale, hoping that society doesn't lead to the path of what he was born from, you know? To me, it's just a family trying to do right by him too, you know?
Sure.
I love the backstory of Martha and Jonathan Kent that makes this individual a great person in himself. I mean, take away the powers, I still would want that individual to be my friend. The powers to me, though, doesn't make Superman. It's almost I guess a gift for someone that thinks so much of the world, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I think I think the thing that's kind of crucial to Superman also, and the thing that's kind of interesting, is that right from the get-go, like right from the first panel of that book, we're introduced to a world bigger than just Earth, even though Krypton blows up essentially right away. But it does open the world that, like, okay, like aliens exist, right? And interstellar travel exists. And it makes the universe huge right from the start.
Yeah.
You know? And that's kind of a thing that I like about the DC. Like, I like the vastness of it. That, you know, it's a universe that goes back 82 years, publication wise.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of stories, a lot of characters, a lot of writers, a lot of artists dip their toes in there and kind of leave their mark.
Yeah, a lot of stories, a lot of passion, and a lot of characters. People who are affected by it and what comes after, you know? And I like I just like the genuineness of it, you know? It feels like old age Greek mythology. Well, not, I won't say Greek mythology, but more along the lines of, you know, the acts of acts of heroism, you know, the path of the hero.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like that's strongly depicted in DC Universe.
I was saying, you mean like along the hero's journey of it?
Yeah, for most cases, a lot of what DC embodies is the hero's journey, I like to think. The need to be to make the world a better place despite what's going on, like I said earlier.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where with the DC universe, especially, you get a lot of characters that sort of, while they have tragedy and stuff that goes in their lives, you do have a lot of characters that just sort of do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, which I always thought was interesting. For example, you have like let's say Barry Allen. You have Barry Allen who grew up. They've shown like that he was basically a Flash fan, a fan of Jay Garrick's, and then by that example, he basically learns how to be a better person. Like that's part of his whole thing about being a forensic police officer is the fact that he, or a forensic scientist, I should say, is that he learns from Jay Garrick about being the Flash and about being a good person. It's kind of a nice meta moment early on in DC history. The idea of doing the right thing, granted, from the example of a comic book, I think is a really nice message that a lot of people kind of gloss over when they talk about that character or comics in general.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, it's great that you bring up Barry because you're hitting on a point that I was thinking about today. I think something that a lot of people miss too is that the heroes of DC, by and large, like try to be good and helpful to society, like in every facet of their life. So I was thinking about this, like Bruce Wayne's a philanthropist, right? Mm-hmm. With the Wayne Foundation. He's always got all those charities and giving money to like disenfranchised kids, that like, right. If it wasn't for his wealth, he very easily could have been one of these people.
Sure.
Right. Given his story. And Clark's a reporter. So his whole thing is searching for truth out there, right? Revealing the truth out there to the masses. Barry's a crime scene investigator. Wonder Woman's is a diplomat.
Right.
Like everybody, even outside of the cape, has something that they're pursuing to help society, which I think is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And you have slackers like Booster Gold and Guy Gardner too.
Sure, right. Yeah. Not everybody, but it's one of those things where if you look at your early. Early. I mean, if we're talking about all the way to the Golden Age, a lot of those people were, scientists. I mean, Alan Scott ran a broadcasting company, right?
Yeah.
Jay Garrick was experimenting with heavy water when he got his powers. I mean, Ted Grant's a boxer, but still, he's Wildcat, so he's awesome.
Sure.
Kind of hard to argue with that one. But I mean, like you said, with the rest of them, it's all, they're generally in situations where even if they didn't, I think there's been plenty of stories where, so-and-so didn't, it's an alternate world story or, timelines change and they have to change it back and so-and-so didn't get powers and they're still making a big difference either in their communities or at large by virtue of the fact that they don't have powers, but they're still, like you said, they're basically good people. Yeah. And I know when I've read about stuff about like the Silver Age, when you're talking about, and again, we're not knocking Marvel because we love Marvel, but it's one of those things where early on around the time of the Fantastic Four, when the superheroes start to come back in vogue for them, and basically transforms that company, the knock on DC was like, well, everyone has these, mamby-pamby problems and nobody's really real. And I'm like, that's a really simplistic way to look at it because not all those books are that way. I mean, they have problems, they're fighting crime and doing stuff, but at the same time, it's not as it's not the same storytelling you just get when Stan Lee starts doing stuff at Marvel. But I think it's kind of a misnomer, kind of a misdirect to think that those characters didn't go through things early on in those books, or at least when in the early parts of the Silver Age, I should say.
Right.
I thought that DC had a lot less, and I'm using this as with air quotes, please, internal struggles of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them knew who they are and their place in the world for the larger part. It was just how to embody that in the world we live in.
Right.
That's, I think, their major concern was. Like, don't get me wrong. It's not like, I think Superman knew who he was, hence the secret identity. It was never, I don't think he really questioned his role in it all. It's just a matter of, am I strong enough to handle this role that I've created for myself? Is what most of the struggles that went on with the DC Universe people. It's like their need to be greater than what they were. Hence, a lot of people see them as gods in that manner.
Right.
In which their undertaking and what they did was a lot larger than a normal person can conceive of,
Right. Another thing that's a knock on that I've heard people say about DC characters, or like you said, they're just so powerful. They're just so godlike. They're so, they can't relate. I'm like, they can't relate. A lot of the knock is they can't relate to normal everyday problems. And I go back and I look at, a lot of those, like you were saying, Tommy, a lot of those, like if you look at those early Silver Age or like Superman and Batman covers, a lot of them are, like Superman's upset about the fact that I mean, like you could say it's not all the imaginary story stuff, but some of it's like Superman just being in a situation where he's able to go back to Krypton and like can't stop the fact that Krypton explodes, or he sees a vision of like another. That's just an example, but like another example is something along the lines of Superman could alter this and can't, even with all his powers, Superman can't change or be there for everyone, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I think it's one of the things that gets kind of glossed over and like, oh, those are silly stories. I'm like, not all of them are. A lot of them are, they're kind of goofy, but a lot of those are rooted in the fact that Superman's, been an orphan from this planet. I mean, granted, they start to add the mythos with Crypto and Supergirl, and then the bottle of Candor and all that stuff that comes along. But there's a certain loneliness to Superman that I don't think really gets appreciated. The fact that a lot of those early stories are like, I'm Superman's long lost brother. And then by the end of the story, it's like, no, you're not. You're just some guy who's trying to pull one over or something. And there's a lot of those, Superman searching for family stories that don't really get, I think quite the appreciation that they should, because again, when people are like, oh, Superman's so powerful, you can never have any real problems. I'm like, yeah, he does. He's pretty lonely early on in those stories. So even if they're played in a goofy sort of Silver Agey way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the great things about the Silver Age too, aside from being like this explosion in like creativity and imagination, but I think that plays into the everyday qualities of some of these stories, right? So like Superman is like walking Crypto. This is like a Grant Morrison quote I remember. It's okay. It's relatable going out and walking your dog, but like instead for him, because he's got fantastic powers, he's walking him like past Saturn.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I think that like that's what I love about the Silver Age is like here's a relatable thing, and we're just gonna take it, like we're just gonna exaggerate it to 100, right?
Right. Like I remember like with the Barry Allen stuff in Silver Age, like his personal life was always a mess, and it was always that he was late for everything, which is just a fun ironic twist since he's the fastest man alive. But he always had so much stuff going on that he couldn't be there for everything, and then would screw stuff up.
Yep. That's one of my absolute favorite things about Barry Allen. The idea that he is perpetually late as the fastest man alive. I love it. I love it so much.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. Is a lot of those stories is like, it's, it may seem goofy and charming in a way for, and I think it's charming for the time, but, it's one of those things where, Clark has to perfect the fact that at the time, it's not so much now, but Clark, they've definitely, come roundabout on the idea that Clark could be his own person while still being Superman. At the time, Clark had to, I mean, it's done it again in Bring Back Morrison. Morrison does it really well in All-Star Superman. The idea of, Clark has to perfect the slouch and, and sort of pretend that he's a schlub, and that's, and it's never, again, it's not one of those things where I think it might be in like the Bronze Age or like the 70s stuff where they start to have a moment of Clark being like, well, wait a minute, I do all this, and that's kind of debilitating to me as a person just so I can pretend that I'm Superman.
Right.
So that no one figures this out. Yeah. So my, my parents and my loved ones and my coworkers and all these, people are going to be threatened by that. And then Barry's the same way, where Barry's got to come up with this whole thing of, of basically being late for all the stuff when he could be there in an instant.
Yeah.
You have the thing you have the same way with Bruce Wayne, where Bruce Wayne has to pretend, and it's played up, I think, really well, like early on in, it might be in somewhere earlier, but my biggest memory of it is in Year One with the Frank Miller and Mazzucchelli stuff, where, Bruce has to pretend that when he gets injured, he's, been on a ski trip and injured himself, right?
Yeah.
He has to have the two women there pretending like, I don't know who they are. I don't know if they speak the language, but here I am with them when Gordon comes around sniffing around to see if he's, to see if he's Batman or not. And that's kind of things where like 20, 30 years earlier, it's Bruce pretending he's just a fop, that doesn't care. He's a layabout who just cares about counting his money, when really we all know that, no, he's Batman. And he's going to go out tonight and stop whatever, nonsense Two-Face is up to or whatever. So I think
that stuff is encapsulated so well in the Dark Knight in that one bit where he arrives in the party. You remember, like he's throwing the Harvey Dent like benefit, right? And he arrives in a helicopter. And he's got like 4 women, right? And then there's that moment where he's out of the balcony. He's talking to Rachel, and he's got like the bottle, like the glass of champagne. And he just tosses it like over the side.
Well, I love the bit that I love in that same like sequence, like when the Joker shows up and he goes in that secret room, and the girl's like, "Is that a panic room?" And he just because of course, why wouldn't he have a panic room?
Sure.
But he just, he totally ignores him because of course we all know he's going to be, go put on his suit. But still, it's a moment of, it's a nice, a moment that fits well into character of like, this is a vapid guy that doesn't care about anyone and all he cares about is millions or billions, I should say.
Well, I like the bit where he's in the car and he creates the accident. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah. That's a great moment too.
Yeah.
But again, but again, that's an extension of all the stuff that's come before of trying to, you've got to do all this stuff to protect your identity so that people don't figure it out. So your loved ones and yourself aren't, so people aren't showing up at Stately Wayne Manor trying to blow your head off. Right.
Yeah.
Going back to the very beginning of DC, just in counterpoint to Superman, is how broad they made the universe right out of the gate so that they could fit everything. So you've got your first guy with godlike powers, and then your next big sustainable superhero is the guy with no powers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Super street level. He's fighting crooks. He's fighting purse snatchers and stuff like that. Yeah, I know. That's what I love about it too, is that you can go interstellar as space and galaxy hopping stuff, and then like, Frank, you and I say this all the times, and then you have like 70s Batman where like a crook with a wrench could take out Batman.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's like, what is it, Night of the Stalker we've talked about before, where it's kind of like, a guy gets a drop on him, and if not for a less shallow lake, it's one of those he wouldn't make it out, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like the idea, like you said, it's interesting to me, the idea of, from the get-go, right from the first panel, it's like, oh yeah, Krypton exists. There's, it's outer space, aliens are a thing, right? And again, it's such a sci-fi concept that basically gets turned on its head because, the other thing is this alien is going to come to Earth and basically become Earth's greatest hero is an odd concept. And again, it's, obviously it's related into myth, your mythology, like Tommy was saying, the idea of, there's the whole sending this godlike person to man is somewhat Christ-like, and I don't always like it when it goes
or Moses. There's some Moses,
right? Yeah, no, I was about to get to it. I was about to get there, Cliff. It was the next thing was like, yeah, it's also very much Moses in the reeds and sent down to Pharaoh. It's also that too, but thankfully, instead of Pharaoh, he gets Jonathan and Martha. And there's been stories about that, like The Nail by Alan Davis, where we get to see what happens in a world where Superman doesn't end up with the Kents or Red Sun, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting to me, the idea that it's a very positive story of the idea of like, yeah, he's going from this dying world, and he's coming to Earth, and he's still going to be met and embraced. And it even plays out more in the idea of the Hitman issue, Hitman 34, which is I think in our
favorite single
issues episode is one of my favorites of The I Sing, which is the idea of like Superman's whole thing is, and this is explained to him by Tommy Monahan, the hitman, the assassin. The idea that no, your whole thing is what America should be. The idea that you arrive here as an immigrant and you basically are like, oh, now I'm an American. How can I help? And that's Superman in a nutshell, basically.
Yeah. Well, what I like about it too is like the versions where Jor-El sends Kal-El to Earth and knows essentially like you're gonna be bestowed with powers when you get there and stuff like that. Like one of my like if I have to pick my favorite Superman movie of all time, I pick the trailer to Superman Returns. Right? The first teaser to Superman Returns. Okay. Like the movie's kind of all over the place. It's up and down and all that, and I don't want to get too much into it, but the trailer, like I'm not exaggerating. I get kind of choked up watching that teaser every single time when it's got like the Brando like voiceover where it's like, I'm sending them you, my only son, they're great people, Kal-El. They choose to be, right? That's like it. God, it gets me every time. We'll put it up for sure. But there's a hopefulness to it that I like. And one of the other things I love about Superman, and this is a topic that I'm kind of dying to get into for another episode, the idea of like love interests and stuff like that. But this is why Superman and Wonder Woman together like never really felt good to me, that because there's such a beauty to the most powerful being on the planet falls in love with just some woman over there. Not that Lois is your typical woman. She's not, you know what I mean? But you get my point. Like she's just a normal girl.
You can send all your hate mail to Zach at tellmehowitis.com. hate mail because, typical woman. Just make sure that's your header line there. But go on, Zach, please.
No, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
She doesn't have powers or anything like that.
She's not another godlike being.
Yeah,
right. I got you.
She's just a woman from Earth.
Right.
And there's a beauty to that I really, really love.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, taking a little step from the Superman aspect of which I introduced, I also like how DC embodies legacy and children or sidekicks.
Yes.
In which they do it like no other. I mean, it besides that point of hope towards children in which they matter too, and it looks towards generations and their influence and the direction you want to take them, as opposed to leaving them behind to watch adults do their thing. The way they bestow their ideals and goals and dreams upon the younger generation as they look up to them and try to mold them into something greater, which I enjoy from the DC universe.
Well, I like the fact that that's one of the things I remember. When I collected early on was the idea of, so there's a Flash on this Earth, and then there's Barry Allen. Okay. And then it extended further. There's 2 Green Lanterns, and there's 2 Supermans, there's 2 Batman. And then as time goes on, obviously characters die off. And then it got to be a point when after Crisis, when they merge everything together, the idea, like you said, Tommy, that legacy becomes more and more important. It's one of those things where, a character can start in one place. One could be one character, and then like for example, Manhunter. Like Manhunter was. Paul Kirk Manhunter was basically it was tied in loosely to the Manhunters from Green Lantern mythology, and then it became there was a Manhunter in the 80s after Crisis, and then you had Kate Spencer who was Manhunter, and that's just one example out of a myriad of examples that just the name gets passed down along further and further, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I love about Crisis on Infinite Earths is the byproduct of we want to sort of like run a comb through the entire DC universe and make it more accessible. But at the same time, we want to say that all these characters and stories happened. And so what you get is DC goes really far into the past. You got the JSA and the World War II heroes and Sergeant Rock and the Losers and Unknown Soldier and stuff like that. Right. And then you can also go like really far into the future with, I mean, in the case of like Legion of Superheroes, really, really far. Right. But then, I mean, there's it's so big. The universe is so big that there's multiple points in the future that are big. It's like Booster Gold's time and Impulse, like Bart Allen's time. And then there's Commandy and OMAC and, and Batman Beyond even, if you want to, and we're not even talking like Dark Knight Returns and stuff like that too, as like these possible futures and stuff.
Well, I mean, that's one thing one of my points that I was going to bring up that I'm glad you mentioned that, Zach, because to me it was, I think better than any but other, again, nothing against the Marvelous competition. I think that DC, for whatever reason, gets the future, not necessarily right, because they've had a lot of reboots and revamps and restarts. But I think the idea that it does the future better than other comic companies, I think is far and away, like you said, there's the various, there's the OMAC and Batman Beyond and Booster. But I think the idea that, when you really start to think about the future, it's Legion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, granted, like you had, like, there's plenty of Flash stories where early on where Barry would go to like the 53rd century or whatever, or the Justice League would go to the end of time or that kind of stuff. But I'm talking like, if you look at your main look at what, 1,000 years from now, what the future of DC Comics would be, or at least that DC universe would be, it's the Legion. And I like the fact that I've always liked the fact that it's teenagers, it's kids. It's not, it's not necessarily like the version of the Justice League 1,000 years later. I like the idea that it's, it's kids from all over the galaxy basically coming together and deciding to do the right thing based on what they thought Superman or Superboy, depending on what you're looking at or your timeline, that's what they're looking at, is that's their, their barometer for how they should act and how they should do things. And I've always liked that idea that the future is in their hands.
Yeah. No, I think I'm saying the word beautiful, but yeah, a lot. It's what's beautiful about Legion of Superheroes is that is the idea that, I mean, there's a couple of different versions, right? Where you said like they're inspired by Superman himself,
right,
in the 20th century, and then there's other versions where they're inspired by sort of like the Age of Heroes of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
The future, of course, culminates to the Legion, and I love how utopian. At the same time, it's not. It's a little bit disheveled, but it's grander in its scope. But I love how they equally, like what you said, Zach, how they equally embody the dystopian age, the last human alive age, or the super futuristic age, which is just, I mean, what they do. I like how they encapsulate eras in which stories are able to evolve as a result of the future, but ultimately it's a greater tomorrow, even though it takes a little time to get to it.
Right.
I love how it's seen through a different scope during periods of time to allow other heroes or eras to evolve and great stories to come of it, and still do it all. At the end of the road, it's going to be a better tomorrow. It still embodies hope on a level or scale that we only dream of,
Well, I mean, the idea that you have like the Great Disaster, you have the time of OMAC, you have all these things that people don't necessarily are, more and more, they're trying to like try to fit it all. Yeah, I think with Millennium, they tried to do and I'm talking about the Millennium, not the miniseries in the early or mid '80s or whatever, or the late '80s. I'm talking about the one that was the Bendis one, but that launched the new Legion of Superheroes.
Yes.
The idea that, they're trying to make that, Great Disaster, OMAC, Batman Beyond, Tommy Tomorrow, Space Cabbie, all that stuff, sort of fit a timeline so it actually leads to Legion is a good thing, I think, because of the fact, like you said, Tommy, the idea that, yeah, we're going to go through a lot of stuff, but I mean, for me, it's hopeful the idea that, 1,000 years in the future, Superman's belief system and what he thought to be important is still relevant, right? Because I think one of those things where, for a minute at DC and I understand the push to be like, Superman's outdated, and again, I get back to my favorite issues, my favorite single issues, and I'm talking about Action 775, the idea that no, Superman's, belief system and what he stands for is not outdated. It's just that the people, the world around him might change, but Superman's still that thing that you want to be, that good, right thing. I think the fact that 1,000 years in the future, that's still a possibility, even after a great disaster or the weird, messed up world of OMAC or, whatever, comes along. Eventually it's going to right itself. And then, oh yeah, these kids are going to still think that Superman's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Despite it all.
And and the other thing is the fact that, they flesh it out. It's not so much at the beginning, but, other writers come along on Legion. Originally it's it's Lightning Lad and Cosmic Boy and Saturn Girl. They all go back in time to Smallville to talk to Clark Kent, Superboy, and recruit him, and they put him through basically a hazing process to see if they can join his, the superhero club. But obviously they want to take him on because they think, they know he's going to turn into.
Really quick. Hey, really quick. Just to be clear, you're talking Superboy, Clark Kent Superboy.
Yes.
Not the current, not Connor Kent.
No,
not the one that you see in Young Justice and stuff like that, right?
No, not Connor Kent, not Connell. I'm talking about like original Clark. Like I'm talking like the 50, like I think it's 58 is when Legion first shows up in Adventure Comics. And it's kind of a template for what comes later. But what I'm saying is, my whole point was, even though you have this idea that like this is like, oh, we're having unity and stuff between these kids of different planets, other writers come along and basically like they see that and flesh that out of like, oh, some of these planets don't get along, kind of like the Fire Nation, the Earth Nation, or Fire Nation in
Avatar.
In Avatar, right? It's the same thing in The Last Airbender, where like, yeah, a lot of these kids don't necessarily get along, but they're getting together for the better good of possibly having the planet be united, the planets be united, that's better than having, petty squabbles between two planets that don't get along or that we're at war or, right, Tommy? And that's some of the stuff that comes up.
Yeah, definitely. I like the whole idea of having a galactic, United States on a galactic level, basically is what I see it as. The need to organize and build on the shortcomings and the fallacies of what we engaged earlier. Despite our differences, we need to come together and be one. Basically, is what the Legion embodies, and they do it in such a way that their whole team is built up of individuals from different planets. I mean, they could go with just Earthlings or things of that nature, where the United Planets is based on in some cases,
right?
But it's just the inclusion of different people from different races, different backgrounds, different cultures. Despite what they're coming to do, but they all still embody the same idea, and the hope of tomorrow is what they learned from Superman.
Yeah. And I think it's a smart thing too, because if it was all Earthlings in the 30th century, it would seem regressive, right?
Yes.
when you're looking at the present day, and depending on what version of the Justice League you're looking at, but you're seeing people from Mars, you're seeing people from like the Hawks from Thanagar and stuff like that. Like you know, the Kryptonian's the leader, you know, so it's already made up of people from different planets. And so I think, yeah, if they did only Earthlings in Legion, it would seem like a step back.
Mm-hmm.
Very regressive. It'll be very regressive. I mean, come on. 1,000 years in the future, we still can't get together and, you know, be one world. That's a little sad, you know.
But yeah, I think also one of the things about legacy that I get to that's really interesting about the DC universe is I think characters like Wally West and Dick Grayson, they get to grow up, right?
Yeah.
They're characters that we get to see as children, starting off as Robin and Kid Flash, and then ultimately become, you know, Nightwing and you know, and in Wally's case, actually becoming the Flash and taking the mantle, and you know, Nightwing becomes Batman for a short period as well. But I think that's such a unique thing that fleshes out the timeline a little bit, that gives you that sense of like the past and the present and the future and stuff a lot better, I would say, than, again, don't want to crap on Marvel or anything, but it's like DC, I think, is a little bit more motivated at creating a firm timeline for things.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, I mean, I think it's one. I mean, again, that back, you know, getting back to the future. No pun intended there. The idea that, you know, at Marvel at one point the future was the Guardians of the Galaxy, but they're a totally different group of characters than are what the more popular Guardians are. I mean, like, they're not really the same. You know, they were basically 5 or 6 characters that were together. Same thing where they were slaves of the Badoon and they come together and then they, you know, form the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right, Yondu was like the only carryover.
Right, yeah, exactly.
From the original to now, but basically still a different character and just similar in look and name.
Right. I mean, you get like Stallone in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 plays Starhawk, and you get Ving Rhames as Charlie 27. But it's one of those things where, like, if you don't, you know, again, if you don't really know, they're not really spelled out. You know, it's not one of those things where you would know that they were supposed to be the original Guardians unless you knew that, you know, that's what they were. But I think it's one of those things, like I said, with DC, where DC's like got a much stronger, you know, I mean, Marvel has 2099, and that's one of their versions of the future and stuff, and there's random other stuff, but it's not nearly as
and Days of Future Past. 2099 and Days of Future Past are like the two Marvel futures that stuck.
True, that's true. Yeah. But that's one of the things where, like, there's not really, beyond those things, there's not a lot of cohesion with what their future even potentially could be. Like, you don't regularly have groups from Marvel's current time go to a future and hang out with characters anymore. Like, you had it happened from time to time, but it doesn't really happen as regularly, like, say, hey, we're going to go to the 30th century and visit the Legion. Right? That's something that doesn't happen near as much. So, and then, you know, for the longest time, up until, you know, I don't know, the last 10 years, Legion was a book that was pretty much done, you know, from the 60s on. You know, it was one of those perennial books that came out in some form for years and years and years, which you can't say that about, say, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree. Like Marvel, I mean, that is an interesting thing for Marvel, though, is that they don't say concretely, like, this is the future. And so it does lend a little bit more to, like, all of that stuff still in play.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I'm with you. I think that kind of trying to roll in Batman Beyond and Kamandi and OMAC into a scenario where all of that kind of funnels into the Legion, I think is really, really smart to do. And I mean, that's always what I kind of assumed anyway in my head, when you're kind of making your own continuity as you're reading all of this stuff and just being a fan of this stuff. It was also one of the things that I thought Young Justice, the cartoon, had as a goal in mind. It just seemed to be going that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, but another aspect I like to add with DC that I love is characterization. I mean, to me, they come across as, when they have an idea of characterization, who they want their people to be, it's so definite and defined. Like, let's say with Darkseid, to me, he's just the villain. I mean, I've yet to see, in my opinion, a stronger villain seen in that arc, in which he's just the embodiment of, you know, stoic, persistent, all encompassing. I mean, he's just bad. I mean, it's so imposing. I mean, you can threaten him if you want to, but as soon as you see him, it's a point of awe. And like, what's this guy going to do to me? Is he going to kill me? Is he going to do this? He's going to use me. That's just one example of what they have plans for their characters in that regard that I enjoy about DC.
Well, I do think it's interesting that when we're talking, I mean, Darkseid's a good example, but I think we're talking villains. I think DC, I'm not going to say has better villains. I'm just saying that DC will take a bigger chance on a villain leading a book. Like, I think DC,
okay.
DC has a much better track record of, let's put the villain in the lead and see what happens.
Yeah, like Lex or Joker.
Right, because Joker had his own book for a while.
Lex had his book.
Lex had different various one-shots. He had a run in Action Comics right after Blackest Night, where he's had the orange.
Got a movie. Got a movie.
Yeah.
Like, I'd be surprised too if we don't have a Lex Luthor movie coming.
Yeah,
because of it too. Like, it wouldn't surprise me in the least.
But I mean, you've had there's been like Catwoman. Catwoman's had a book. Deathstroke's had a regular book for a long time.
Yeah.
Suicide Squad.
Suicide Squad was another one. I mean, before that, it was Supervillain. Secret Society of Supervillains was another book at DC that definitely was was all about the bad guys. So I think,
can we say Secret Six?
Sure, Secret Six is another one. Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's definitely
a good one, a very good one.
Oh, it's a great one. I think Gail Simone's run on that was fantastic. It's a good. I think it's as close to as you were going to get for John Ostrander's Suicide Squad.
Suicide Squad. Mm-hmm.
Much more than the actual Suicide Squad books they've tried to do.
Mm-hmm.
But in tone and everything, both those books are great. So it's one of the Villains United is another one out of Infinite
Crisis. Yeah,
Infinite Crisis. Yeah.
The countdown to Infinite Crisis.
Yes, that they came out of those books. So again, it's one of the things where I think DC is much more. Oh, it's Sinestro, the Sinestro one that was out a few years back by Cullen Bunn.
Right.
That was another book that was if you like Sinestro, it's a great book. So I think DC is much more willing. Like at Marvel, again, this is not a knock on Marvel, but by comparison, you don't have like Green Goblin. Green Goblin doesn't. I mean, granted, you had Thunderbolts. But in that
Thunderbolts is a good one.
Yeah, here's the Thunderbolts one with Norman in charge is pretty great. But I just don't think there's a lot. I mean, when you for pound, I think DC is much more willing to say, yeah, we'll put a villain in the lead. And I think that's an interesting thing because there's a lot of people that while they can't. And again, you could argue that Lobo's he's not a villain, but he's definitely an anti-hero.
Yeah,
sure.
But it's one of those things where I think you can look at it and say, that DC is much more willing to make that leap, because there are some people who don't believe that people can be inherently good. That no, they would probably lean or list towards being more villainous than the hero would, than having heroes.
Yeah,
no, I agree. It's a very strong assortment of bad guys that are like the typical archetype thing. That's usually some kind of mirror reflection of the hero.
Speaking of, not to cut you off there, Zach, but I would be incredibly remiss to not mention the Doug Mahnke, Peter J. Tomasi Black Adam miniseries. That was just phenomenal stuff. If you like Black Adam, that's another great one too.
Okay,
what year was that one?
It's
or time period.
It's
least.
Right around the time of. It's after. Right, I think it's right after 52.
Okay.
Yeah, right around that time.
Was that like the World War III stuff that was going on at that time?
I want to say it's either right before or right after that stuff.
Okay,
because it's a lot of responsive stuff that has happened to, what's happened to him as a result of 52, with him with ISIS and all that. So, but yeah, it's a great series. Again, it's really, really good. But again, it's another instance of the villain is the lead. Again, you can argue that Black Adam's an anti-hero, but for the longest time, he was straight up villain. So, yeah,
well, and I think with the Rock movie coming out too,
right,
that they're just going to double down more on that. The idea that he's an anti-hero, and
right,
yeah,
the movie they've been talking about for 12 years.
Yes. Yeah, but Frank, that was a time where he wanted his own family with ISIS and
Osiris.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That was a good run. Yeah.
Yeah. because a lot of that stuff is the stuff that Johns was doing in JSA, and then like I said, Tomasi doing that Black Adam mini, which is just really, really good.
Yeah, I got to check that one out. I never read that one.
Okay.
But I remember that period. I mean, that was one of my favorite periods in DC, like that Infinite Crisis, 52 time. I mean, that was just like at a point where I think DC was really embracing all of their characters and trying to make everything just put it out there. You know what I mean? It didn't seem like they had a sense that you would do your homework, and if you didn't know this character who it was, like, you would just look it up. You know what I mean? And I think that DC's kind of gotten away from that a little bit, and I miss it terribly. Like, I really like I think that was what the company did best when they were building up, when they had these huge casts building up to this one crucial like crisis event.
Well, you had a good 5, almost 6 years of just stuff of building, and you would have characters show up from other books. You have characters from books talking to each other as an epilogue page, and you're like, well, what is this all leading to? And what it was all leading to was Infinite Crisis, where basically
that was leading from like 2004 to 2007.
Yeah, where you had a good chunk of time where it was everybody was on the same page creatively. It seemed like. Everyone was like basically, here and there with the ball, the football was getting advanced, every couple of yards, and you're like, okay, well, surely this is going to build to something. And then it all, all these major events all sort of came to, the various worlds, all the magic stuff, and as well as the OMAC stuff that was going on, and all started, to basically dovetail into this one event. It was great. It was a great time at DC. It's one of those things where I would agree with you, Zach, at the idea that, they don't seem to do, they just want to have a thing pop up, and it's supposed to be a world ender, as opposed to laying the foundation for a while and then having it be a big event.
Yeah, no, that one was definitely earned.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it was big, and it felt justifiably big at the set. Right, it didn't feel like one of those stories, to piggyback off of what you're saying, that this is big because we're telling you that it's big, like comics will do. So like. A number of times, but
it came at a time of, if anyone can believe it, where there were no big events for like 10 years,
right?
Like, which is hard to believe again.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a time when there wasn't events all the time, and Infinite Crisis was the first one in a long time.
Yeah.
But that's also, that's indicative of one of the other things about DC that I love. Now, if I was going to ask you guys what are the pinnacle stories of DC Universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would say Dark Knight Returns. You would say Year One. You would say, right, you would have a couple of Batman stories. You would have a couple of Superman stories. But how quickly would you get to like smaller books, right? How quickly would it be until you get to like Animal Man,
mm-hmm.
which has a seminal run,
right?
And Mark Waid's Flash. And stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that that's an important thing also, that they focus on Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman a lot, but there are these moments where the smaller book will bubble up and have immense staying power.
Yes.
Oh
yeah.
I think Mark Waid's Flash run is as good a run of superhero comics as you will ever read.
There's some really phenomenal stories in there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
He does a lot of, does some great stuff with Wally. There's still people that to this day are like, no, it's all well and good that Barry Allen's back, but Wally West is the Flash. You know what I mean? Like, that's how good it is.
Yeah.
That people still look on it fondly. To me, it's I like Barry, but I love Wally. And Wally's, awesome. Those
yeah, I'm the same way too. And I think as far as like the idea of legacy that we keep getting into, that book is very important
mm-hmm.
for that, for a couple of reasons. Flash tends to be the character for these big universe shifting things that happen at DC, but at the same time,
not a crisis if a Flash doesn't die.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you get also the fact that Wally takes over from Barry
mm-hmm.
and is trying to measure up to Barry.
Oh, sure.
And doesn't think he can do it for a long time.
Yeah.
Is beautiful.
Yeah, for a long time it's played in that book, and for the beginning of it, it's It's who's the beginning writer? Mike Barron is the writer at the beginning for like the first 7 or 8, I think, and then William, or maybe it's the first year, and then William Mesner Lopes takes over, and they both expand upon the idea that coming out of Crisis, Wally's in remission from cancer, and then he freaks out obviously when Barry dies because of how much Barry means to him, and then it shifts from he's like, all right, I'm gonna take on the mantle of the Flash, and then he does, and then it goes into Legends, and it becomes this whole thing of going into his own series. I want to be the Flash, but I don't want to replace Barry. And it's a very meta moment, the idea that, yeah, I'm willing to do this, but in a lot of people's minds, again, Barry Allen is the Flash coming out of that time period. But, and for a while he can't go as fast as Barry. He has, he's in therapy, he's trying to get past it. And it's a whole component of the book for a long, long time. And finally he embraces the idea of like, nope, I'm the Flash, I'm going to do this. And he does. And it's awesome. Again, it's really fantastic storytelling.
Yeah, I was listening to an interview with Mark Waid, and one of the interesting things he said, reflecting on his time on that books, is he said when he took over Flash, that the God's honest feeling at DC at the time, editorially, was, why are we still printing this thing? like why is the Flash still in publication?
Right.
You know what I mean? And he was saying like how that's, from a writer perspective, you want to be in that position really, because like you have so much freedom, because if they kind of don't care about it,
right, they're not
and what you do,
right, they're not going to be sticking their head in the door and being like, hey, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
But I mean, those books are, I read that book from issue 1. I read all of it. I read the entire run, the whole thing, even to like, from the beginning to Mike Barron to the end, when I think it's Jeff Johnson. I'm not sure who writes the last issue because I don't think it's him, but he does most of the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I know he and Morrison also had like a weird trading of books for a little while. There was a period where like Morrison would jump on Flash from Justice League, but Mark Waid would jump on Justice League at the time.
You had some of that because Morrison and Miller were writing the Flash together. They wrote those issues. Those were, those are some good ones too. I mean, that's where you get the Black Flash, which is kind of like the Flash version of Death. That comes from that run. But yeah, to me, it's unfortunate. I've lamented the last couple of things they've done with Wally West at DC because of the fact that there was such a strong run and so many good writers were on that character and on that book. So hopefully they'll write that and fix it, fix that ship. But he's a character. He's a character that I'm always fond of and always I always enjoy reading. To me, it's one of those things where it's kind of hard to root against a guy that's been doing this since he was like 12. Again, for the right reasons, getting back to the legacy. And granted, he's kind of a jerk when he first starts off in his own book in the early days of the Mike Barron stuff. He's kind of a jerk, but he gets better. he gets much better. So
there's a nice family dynamic to that book too. Also, we're like, that's the thing that we haven't pointed out to any listeners who don't know, but Wally West is also the nephew of Barry Allen.
Mm-hmm.
So they're family. They're related.
Right.
By marriage through Iris.
Yeah. And then when you get into like to Impulse getting introduced and stuff like that, and Wally marrying Linda and stuff like that, like there's a strong like family component to that book, which I think is cool. And it's not something that DC pushes all the time, but when they do, it's a really cool thing. Superman kind of has a little bit of that too. I mean, there was a period where Supergirl wasn't a character for a very, very long time. And then when they brought her back, I guess that was around like leading up to Infinite Crisis as well, like pretty close. It was like 2002, I want to say, when they actually brought Supergirl back as Superman's cousin.
Right.
Yep.
That was in Superman, Batman, Jeff Loeb, McGinnis. Yeah. That was probably like 2004.
Yeah. The Michael Turner stuff
or 5
that he did the interiors for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun story. I like that. And I mean, and while none of them are blood, I mean, Batman and the Bat family is a strong family component, especially now. I mean, he has like he has a team that's rivals the X-Men in size now. Like he's got so many sidekicks, and and then it's in some versions of those, like he's adopted Tim Drake, he's adopted Dick Grayson, so they are actually like bonded by family at that point. You know what I mean? And then there's all that, like Alfred is the surrogate father and this and that,
Right.
So for a character that's a loner, I mean, he's surrounded himself with a lot of family members, and I think that that's kind of a cool thing too. That DC is able to sort of do both and have it make sense. Like it doesn't. You could still do stories with Batman as a loner, and it doesn't ruin that stuff.
Right.
You know.
Oh yeah, no, I like that aspect too. I like the idea that you're alone, but you're not that alone. Not really. I mean, you are, but at the same time, like you said, there's there's a bat hound.
Yeah. Yeah.
But moving from this aspect of the family stuff, where I like that part. I like that there's a lot of that kind of stuff at DC. One of the other things I really like about DC is DC, at least to me, early on. I mean, you can argue the terminology, but for me, DC felt like it was the first company to really embrace the idea that comics were kind of, well, they were for kids too, they were also for adults. And they wanted to, advance or let their characters age or mature a little bit. Now, granted, it gets out of hand after Watchmen, and then with things all takes the turn of everything has to be ultra grim and gritty, for lack of a better term. But I mean, when I think of more books that I read that challenged me as an adult, there were definitely more at DC.
Especially in the 80s.
Especially in the 80s. But I mean, it's like you're talking your Watchmen, your Dark Knight Returns. And that's even before you get to like stuff like The Invisibles or Preacher or what's another good one at DC? Any of the Vertigo stuff. Sandman. I mean, again, Sandman is one
the Authority.
Right. When they bring in Wildstorm. But the idea, like Sandman's one of those things that, again, it's a legacy character. Yeah. I mean, granted, Morpheus isn't out fighting crime, but you can definitely draw a line from Wesley Dodds being the Sandman in the 30s, being part of the Justice Society, to the one that's the Kirby Sandman that had a couple, handful of issues in the 70s, and then to basically, I'm probably leaving somebody out with being
Neil Gaiman's version,
right? With Gaiman's version in Sandman. We'll get Starman in a minute, but Sandman's one of those where, like, it starts out as one thing, and then Gaiman sort of takes it on this whole other fantasy turn, but it's rooted in the idea. Like, I mean, Dr. Destiny from the Justice League is one of the first main adversaries when Morpheus is trying to recollect his stuff that he lost after being trapped for years. Which is, it's one of those things where I love the thing about Sandman is, like, it's such an adult quote unquote book, but it's so still strictly rooted in DC continuity. I love that about that book. It's one of the things where I'm like, oh yeah, it's it's that fantasy book, but at the same time, it's not.
Right. Yeah, like Constantine.
Yeah, Constantine too. Hellblazer is another one where it's kind of like, Hellblazer is so, is part of, first appears in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing run. I think it's 37 is the issue. But it's one of those things where, he starts out there and, he's this con man magician, and then he becomes
he dresses like a fop.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Very much so. Looking like Sting. But but the idea that that whole thing grows into something, something more, and becomes its own thing in Hellblazer, and you get, like, his origin in Newcastle and the Family Man and storylines and all that stuff. It's so much, again, they with the Vertigo especially, that imprint, DC definitely were like, okay, well, we know our readership is growing up and we need to cater to it.
Yeah.
And for a long time they didn't, they were doing a lot of books that were, like I said, a normal outreach of the stuff they were already doing, and then eventually it became, a lot of creator and imprint and stuff and stuff beyond just being like the regular superhero stuff. But some of it was still, like The Invincibles, I would argue, is still a somewhat super heroic book. It's just not straight up superpowers and costumes type thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I get so frustrated when I hear the arguments that comics have to be one thing or the other. Like, it's got to be, superheroes should only be like kid friendly and fun and for children, and like, no. Then, like, it should only be for adults, and it should be grim and gritty, and it should be like what? Like, I like having all the flavors.
Right.
You know what I mean? I feel like every book should, you shouldn't have to peg the entire universe to have the same tone. I think that that's the beauty of it. And I think that that's one of the things that that Hollywood was getting wrong as far as adapting movies, is that they all thought that they all had to kind of be like Batman, like Blade, like Darkman, like they all had to be like this sort of tone. And it's like, that's fine, that's good to do if the character is like that, if the character lends itself, but don't try and force a character that is bright and optimistic into that mold.
Sure. Yeah, if it fits in that, that's okay. But if not, then you're just you're doing a disservice to your character by trying to make them fit into that.
Yeah. And also, I mean, and I think you're doing the disservice to the stakes of your story if that's the card you play all the time.
Right.
Because the thing that I think is cool about Superman, for as bright and optimistic as he is, like there are stories out there where things are dark and stuff hits the fan.
Sure.
And like the Apocalypse Now 2-parter from the animated series is as, like he's put through the ringer in that episode for sure. Mm-hmm. It's as dark as something you'll see.
Right.
And it's great. And I mean, and it stands out because the show was bright more times than not. Not to say that there weren't stakes. Always there was,
right.
Oh
yeah. Oh yeah.
Is there anything about DC currently that's out there that gets you excited?
I'm looking forward to. You mean as far as a particular in the medium of comics or broadly?
Yeah, something that the comics are doing now. I mean, yeah, I guess if you have a movie thing too or a cartoon thing that you want to throw out, by all means. But
I mean, there's the ever looming The Batman by Reeves that should be coming next year, or even Wonder Woman 84. But I was thinking recently or new, which was Doom Patrol.
Mm-hmm.
Be looming. Their second season should be looming soon.
That's a good one.
Yeah. As far as comic books go, the Three Jokers. Yeah, it was supposed to come out in a month, but it's been pushed to August. In which, I'm trying to think of the arc of what Justice League, but Batman has discovered that there are 3 different Jokers or versions of them that exist simultaneously, and DC's on the culmination of interpreting what that means exactly. I think it's a Jeff Johns story, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to see their interpretation as to how they're going to further add more interpretation to this character. To me, I thought reached the tipping point or culmination of it. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops or what that embodies when it's presented come August.
Yeah, it's a gutsy move for sure.
Extremely.
I got to give them credit for that.
Yeah.
Like, they're not taking the safe way out with this.
No,
for sure.
Not
and they've had any number of points to jump off of this. I mean, it's a strange idea, I think, but I'm with you. Like, I'm curious to see where they're going to go with it. Cause I mean, this has been teased for years. So at any point they could have got off the highway on this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really intrigued with that.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I think I mentioned way too many ideas in one go.
No, it's okay.
Because any one of you guys could have said one of those and easily answered that question. But that just, if I blink, despite what people may say or think or to foresee, DC has stuff coming. It's just not as loud as other companies at this point in time. Like, for example, right. I believe there's even talks of us having a Green Lantern show on a streaming site that might come into fruition.
Isn't there and there also supposed to be Justice League Dark, and that was rumored?
Yeah, Justice League Dark. And I love the fact that their animated features come out like every 3 months. That has not stopped for years, despite what they're currently going through.
Speaking of the animated stuff, I'm excited for Superman Man of Tomorrow.
The new animated feature.
Yeah, based on Superman American Alien.
Okay.
By Max Landis. It's actually, I mean, it's a very good, it's one of those things where it's not really one cohesive story. It's more like 7 vignettes or 6 vignettes, I believe, where each issue is a different art team. But basically exploring moments in Clark and Superman's life as he's developing into being Superman.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of those where, like, from what I've seen of the preview, it looks like the stuff there. Some of its stuff is, like they do with all those stories. Some of the stuff is being more expanded, and then other stuff is not. But the stuff they're choosing to focus on is very good. Those issues are, well worth picking up. So
okay. The only thing I will say I'm surprised that that's not currently going on right now. DC has always had an animated show currently out. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm forgetting Superhero Girls, which is currently in production.
Yeah, it's still running.
Teen
on
Titans
Cartoon
Go still.
Network. Teen Titans Go.
I forgot Teen Titans Go. Or maybe I'm thinking more along the lines of a Batman or a Justice League or even a Superman cartoon, which they've always had one of the three. Either it's been a Batman, Superman,
Yeah.
or a Justice League cartoon. Like Justice League action.
Well, and Young Justice is still running technically.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I was going to say, too.
Yeah.
Season 4 is coming, yeah.
And
Well,
Harley
I was going to say,
Quinn.
what about Harley Quinn?
Wow. I'll take that back. There's 4 currently out now. Jeez, I guess I'm getting greedy because
For all different age brackets.
yes,
Yep.
I'll take that back. I'm just greedy.
Right.
I just want I just want a particular version that caters to what I particularly love. But I do love Young
To your
Justice.
personal tastes.
Yeah.
Frank, Clifton, what about you guys? Is there something out there that you're excited about?
I mean, I'm pretty behind on the comics right now. I'm trying to catch up, so I've been avoiding what's like previews of what's coming in comics just because I don't know what's happening now yet. But as far as shows, like I've watched the first couple episodes of Stargirl, and for a lot of the CW shows, the DC CW shows, my mileage varies. Some I enjoy a lot, some I don't enjoy so much. But the Stargirl one in the first couple episodes I've seen has been fun so far. I like the tone for it. I like that its tone is different than the other shows that they do, that they're willing to try different things. I like some of the darker shows, but I like this one that's a lighter, more like family entertainment style of show. So I've been enjoying that. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with that one.
Yeah. I agree. This one feels very Disney.
Okay.
Yeah, I made a comment, I think, talking to Zach the other day, where I said it's very Richard Donner, but I'm like, it's not Richard Donner Superman, it's Richard Donner Goonies.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have to agree with you on that one.
Yeah, that intrigued me, too, because I was going to get to it, but, knowing me, I'm going to get to it in 2 years from now. But when you said that, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, yeah, I would not have guessed that at all. Yeah.
For me, it's I'm excited to see what they're going to do with Superman and Lois. Speaking of the CW shows,
Okay.
I mean, I don't know how far along they got into production, but it's one of those things where, given the way the epilogue bit is in the crisis that they had on the CW, is an interesting twist on the mythos. So I'm kind of curious how that's going to play out. I was hoping originally it was going to lean a lot more towards. Again, getting back to Superman and Superman Family, because again, we didn't really talk about it, but at one point in the 70s, Superman Family was, a series of books that basically was, you got a Superman story and then Lois, Jimmy, Supergirl, Superman, Mr. and Mrs. Superman, which was like Superman and Lois from Earth 2, or any it would be Nightwing and Flamebird from the Bottle of Candor. All these characters would be in this, giant size comic every month, right? But Peter Tomasi again did Superman, but it was pretty much a Superman Family book where it was Superman and Lois and Jonathan Kent were all pretty much in on the act every month, and it's great, really, really good run of Superman. If you like that idea, but
Right.
but I mean, I don't want to spoil what the twist is, but it's kind of an interesting twist for the setup for the series, so we'll see how that plays out. And then I'm interested to see how they're going to handle Ruby Rose leaving Batwoman.
Yeah. Me
having,
too.
having to recast that lead role is, it's going to be, a tough switch. I don't know how they're going to handle it.
And she was good too, I thought. Like I enjoyed Batwoman.
I do too. It's one of those things where I thought she,
I like it.
I thought she got, as time went on, she got better and better. So it's one of those things where people are like, she sucks. It's just, you're just being jerks.
Right.
But people still are like, fine, she's left. She's, she sucked. I'm like, she didn't suck. It just took, she took a little while to get used to the role. And as time went on, she got better and better. There's moments in that show that are genuinely good moments that she gives in her performances. So people are just being douches when they say, she sucked.
Right.
So but again, I'm interested. It's one of those things where it's because one of the interesting things they said was, as opposed to doing, these giant crossovers every year, they're going to have a lot of 2 shows of crossover or 3 shows of crossover, but not one ginormous, everybody's involved in the act type show or type crossover. And interesting enough, the next crossover is supposed to be Batwoman and Superman and Lois.
Okay.
So
yeah, I think that's smart though. I think logistically to make a huge crossover like that work every year is so hard. So on one hand, I feel like from a production level, it's a little easier just to cross over 2 shows instead of 4 or 5 or 6 or however many they got going on now.
Right.
They'll probably get some stronger story moments.
Yeah. But also at the same time, whenever they inevitably do a big crossover with all the shows, which I'm sure it's coming, You know, not every year, but I'm sure one's on the books. It will feel more special, I think.
Right.
You know, like the Olympics.
Sure.
You know, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I'm looking forward to. Movie wise and everything, I'm really excited for James Gunn's Suicide Squad.
Sure.
Really excited for it. I cannot wait for it because I know I just seen like on Twitter and everything, like he talks about the Ostrander run of Suicide Squad, which I love. And so I think as far as something to be referencing or something to be inspired by, I feel like that's dead on for me. And even the David Ayer Suicide Squad that we got, the moments that are inspired by the Ostrander stuff, I think are some of the strongest points in the movie. I think it's an uneven movie to me. Well, for sure. I mean,
it's one of those things where I was talking to someone about this the other day. Our buddy Dan was asking me about it, and I said, well, it's one of those things where had they built to that moment in their second movie, because it's definitely in the storylines of the Ostrander stuff. It comes later, the whole reveal about Nightshade and June Moon and Enchantress and all that stuff. About when it comes into play in the book, it's a heavy, it's a moment, it's a big moment in the storytelling. But having it be your first thing out, not so much.
Yeah, I agree. So I think, I love Guardians 1 and 2. So, no reason for me to think that James Gunn's not going to knock it out of the park for this. I think he's tailor-made to do a movie on the Suicide Squad. So I'm really excited for that. Comic wise, I still can't quite get over the fact that Bendis is there and everything I've read, he's making himself at home, which I think is a good thing. Like he's making changes to things, but what excites me about his presence is that he seems to get the tone of everything, right? Like Superman is hopeful, Superman is bright, and he's playing with stuff like that. And so I'm excited for the fact that while nothing's announced, it's inevitable he's going to get Justice League. Right? He will be on a Justice League book before he leaves DC.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm super excited whenever that happens. I'm also excited for Tom King's Batman run, which I've enjoyed immensely. To wrap up, this year, next year. I don't quite know what's happening with release dates now. But yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed it, so I'm really excited to see the crescendo of that as well. So we should start wrapping up, but to close out, what's the DC Comics event that we all think best represents the DC universe in the comics?
I mean, for me, it's it doesn't get any bigger than Crisis. I think the Crisis,
the original Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Crisis on Infinite Earths from '86, because it's one of those things where I know, I belong to a lot of groups that bitch and moan about it. Oh, change, but it's one of those things where I personally, when I read it at the time that I read it, it's a seminal work to me. Like, Marv Wolfman does an amazing job wrangling all those characters. It's hard to argue George Perez and Jerry Ordway, doing all the art. It's a great book. It's one of those ones I love to go back to and just look at it and read. And, it's hard to beat that one when the idea of like everything is on the line. You have major character deaths. It doesn't shy away from that sort of thing. And I think, there are other moments in DC Comics that I love, but I think that event is the one that everyone else has to live up to.
Okay. That's a good one. Tommy, Clifton, who wants to go next?
And the one I enjoyed the most experiencing was the one we already talked about, which was Infinite Crisis and Countdown to Infinite Crisis leading up to it, because I was a little young and just getting into comics probably right after Crisis on Infinite Earths happened, so I didn't get to experience it as it was happening, just looking back at it after knowing all the ramifications of it. But then Infinite Crisis was the one that I did get to read and start trying to put the pieces together myself and experience as it was coming out. So that was the one I've enjoyed the most.
Yeah. Another really good one. Yeah. No, I agree with you. Tommy, what about you?
Kingdom Come. That's a beautifully painted book. I don't think we'll ever get something of that grandeur and that storytelling
until we talk about Marvels next week.
Right. Yeah. But as DC's concerned, don't care for the follow-up. I would love to see that animated.
Right.
and in its majesty. Not so much. I just like I love how it looks, the designs, the thought behind it. Again, it focuses on Superman and hope, and taking that steering away from his ideals, his goals, and his thoughts, and going in a new direction and seeing the chaos it wields.
Well, it's another one that questions whether or not Superman's relevant or not.
Yeah, exactly. But it does it on a larger scale,
right,
than what we've seen before. I enjoyed it. I still enjoy it. It's to me. I even think of it as a quick read, really, because of how quickly it comes from the beginning and the end, and it's seen through the eyes of Wesley Dodd. In a lot of cases, or at least that's how it's introduced. Yeah, I love that book. It's not spoken as it was when it dropped, but I just like the grandeur and the simplicity of it at the same time, and what it tries to accomplish, using the entire DC universe as best as they could.
Right.
Yeah.
No, another Mark Waid one, another Mark Waid classic. He's come up a lot in this episode, which is good. He's awesome. Mark Waid's great. I was gonna say Infinite Crisis because I really enjoyed that time too, but I had a backup ready just in case one of you said it. So I am gonna say Blackest Night, which was another time in DC that I thought was super, super fun to be a part of all of this, because first of all, it was an event that wasn't, Batman and Superman as sort of your anchor point and everything. It was a Green Lantern event, which I thought was cool.
Right.
And it was a Green Lantern event that got big, and it was essentially kind of like a big zombie movie. But what I like about it is being an illustration of the DC universe at large, is that it played off of legacy and it played off of history, in the sense that you got reference to any number of meaningful deaths as part of this story. Right. And you got to see so many characters put through the ringer, because like they're suddenly like face to face with their mentor or their parents or whatever. And I thought it was a really, really interesting time. And I just remember being at a party and telling a buddy of mine who's a Marvel guy about this, because that's what I do at parties. We talk comic books. That's how we roll. Is
wild and crazy.
He's a Marvel lifer, and I remember telling him about this Blackest Night thing, and I got him into the store to come in and start picking up and read Blackest Night stuff. So I thought that was really, really cool. And I thought it was a really good opportunity for DC at the time to really kind of cross over and get more readers. So I'll say that one. So, okay, so that's it for why we love the DC universe. We will do an episode on why we love the Marvel universe. Stay tuned. That's coming. But be sure to tell us in the comments why you love the DC universe. What did we miss? What did we forget? Let us know. Also, if there's a topic you'd like to hear us discuss, go ahead and leave a suggestion in the comments section, and we just might use it on the air. Please also don't forget to check out our website at letmeknowhowitis.com, where you can catch up on all of our past episodes, as well as see notes and links to some of the things we talk about in conversation. You can also find a link and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. And finally, don't forget to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/letmeknowhowitis, and follow us on Twitter at LMKHII. Thanks for listening, and we will see you on the next one.